Today we're going to be talking about the best artifacts in the game. You need to know these things. There are a lot of sleeper artifacts that some people aren't paying enough attention to. So with that being said, let's get it. What up, Team H1 here, back with the Watcher of Realms video talking about artifacts. I made a beginner guide. I stressed heavily as to how important artifacts are in this game. It's one of the most cost-efficient power spikes you can get in the game, period. And that means when you're farming artifact raids, once you start getting the artifact and then upgrading them one level, you will get a much higher yield power spike than you will farming gear, because RNG is crazy, pulling shards for champions, experience rating, just leveling up baseline levels. None of that really comes close to the power spike you get from artifact farming. How did I figure this out, and where did I get this information from? I've been trying to increase my guild boss damage since day one, and that is the easiest place to track your, I guess, borderline progression. So as of today, I am at 70,000 bloods, and I'm pretty much the only one in the top 5 using a non-meta team, which means I don't have a Twin Fiend and I don't have a Zilitu. Not having the two greatest damage dealers in the game, 187 million, 173 million, I mean, you kind of get the point, 145 million. Not having a champion that strong is a massive blow to like overall progression, but I'm doing just fine with this team. How did I come together with this team? Artifacts. Artifacts made the difference for me, because as I was increasing my damage, instead of just giving up on guild boss saying I don't have the meta champions, what am I going to do, I played around with different combinations. I picked this team after testing them and studying them, and then I said, where can I get the cheapest and quickest source of a power gain? I tried farming gear. The numbers were going up way too slow as far as the amount of blood I was getting. I mean, I tried upgrading everyone to max. Once you do that, you hit a plateau. Once everyone's max level, you hit a plateau, you have to get awakenings, and no one should be sitting here telling you it's more beneficial to just spam pull shards to try to get upgrades. It's not the way to go. I've gotten lucky, of course. A3 Hex, only A2 Valeria, would have liked higher, but we played with the hands we're dealt with. However, once I got to artifacts, I noticed right away damage was going up by the millions on all of the heroes that I was upgrading. So it's important for me to explain to you guys what the best artifacts that I found were, and we're going to start first with the Marksmen. Now, for guild boss, the strongest without a doubt is going to be Nether Messenger. I've tried the Sharpshooter's Crest. I would say this one's like the third best if you have an alone hero. There's definitely a viable use for this because Bloodbond Signet is also good. 45% crit damage. The problem is it comes with a negative effect. Reduces max HP by 15% for most of progression, in my experience at least. You can't really afford to drop your HP that much unless the hero's never being touched by any of the enemies, which is very possible. So if that is the case, Bloodbond, of course, is going to be better than the Sharpshooter's Crest, but I would definitely use this over Bloodbond if you had to pick between the two of them, if you are going to be taking damage. Now, despite these three, the really OP ones are Idril's Gaze. That may sound weird because it's not mythic, it's a legendary artifact. This is incredibly powerful. Dealing crit damage, which means if you crit and apply crit damage, which you all should, has a 25% chance to ignore 40% of the target's defense and magic resistance. Like I said, every account in this game should have at least 2 of these, right? I have 2, I've maxed up to 25. You don't have to have yours to 25, but every account should have 2. I plan on making a third to 25 for future content, but I would say every account needs a minimum of 2, because I've noticed that there's a lot of content where 2 marksmen is the meta for the most case, and this is much better outside of guild boss than for the guild boss. And as far as another budget kind of artifact, I do like this one. If a hero hasn't received damage, it will increase their damage by a flat 10%. I think this one is okay. I would not upgrade this, but I would use this after reviewing the legendary ones as a baseline artifact for sure. And then, of course, the cheapest one that's going to be a universal best for most classes is going to be Ancestral Teachings, 16% attack. Right? Now, early on, the value of attack percent isn't going to be as high because your base stats are lower. Once you're level 60, fully promoted, all of that, this of course has very strong value. So that's what I have to say about Marksmen. Next, moving on to Fighters. This one's going to be interesting, and I think a lot of you are going to find a lot of value from this because it's a bit different than what's been shared as of this moment here. So if you have a bleed hero on your roster, Scarlet Hunt is probably the second best overall artifact for all melee. Now, in a lot of content, you can't have a bleed hero in front of every single fighter. So, if that's going to be the case for you, you have some options. Flawless Blade is good if you're not taking any damage. There are very rare scenarios where this is true. There was a case claimed that if you can use someone like Eloin to cleanse off the damage, it's better than Scarlet Hunt. You're never going to do that. I've tried this technology that people have claimed. Flawless Blade will never surpass Scarlet Hunt if you have a bleed hero. If you don't have a bleed hero, I would say use this for sure. As soon as you start taking damage, this becomes a very bad artifact though, because it's literally each time you take damage removes a stack. So if the uptime on this is very low, I would not use it. Crystal of Vileness is something that is probably the best fighter artifact in the entire game. This is something I speculated on when I first started, but I did not think it would be possible to hit the level this would outpace other artifacts this early. Why do I say that? How do I come to this conclusion? Because it has direct attribute scaling. As we can see in the bottom, a full level 25 has a 40% chance of summoning one shadow guard and will deal 150% of the hero's attributes and attack enemies. Effects triggered as often as once every 20 seconds. Okay, so what I envisioned when I first read this was, once we get like an extra gear slot, I'm assuming they're going to add another one to the left side in the future. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. But I think we're going to gain more power over time. That's the natural progression of most games. And I just assume that once we get to that point where we're getting more stats, this is going to be insane. However, the best in slot for heroes with high base attack, like Valeria, like Zilitu, who has a damage increase proc from Twin Fiend, Crystal of Vileness is best in slot by a mile. It destroys Scarlet Hunt, like completely dusts Scarlet Hunt. I don't have numbers in front of me, but if I showed you the damage difference between Scarlet Hunt and a max Crystal of Vileness, of course both of them being ranked 25, it's not even close. This is like the number one by a lot for the champions this is good on. So as I mentioned before, high base attacks required. Pretty much high stats across the board are required. If you don't have this, I don't think it's that common. It does seem like it has a pretty low drop rate. I'm lucky enough to have 2. 4 whenever I end up pulling a Zilitu. Here it is. But until then, I'm just using 1 on Valeria, and she does millions more with this over a Scarlet Hunt. Now we have to talk about Void Gazer. This is best in slot for arrogance. Why? I don't know. First speculation was it was best in slot because every tile between him and the guild boss, it reads as 2, being 1 tile back, and people said, well, I think it's calculating all the way to the back of the guild boss. I don't think that's true. If that was true, the damage increase would be so much higher from what I've seen between Scarlet Hunt and this, right? Because Scarlet Hunt's 30% damage. If it's max tiles, I think it's 7 tiles, making it 45% or 50% damage, depending. I really don't know how many tiles there are, but the difference between the two would be rather high. And from what I've tested, the damage difference between Scarlet Hunt and Void Gazer is very small. So what I'm thinking is, you're getting 2 tile bonus while, I guess I should go to him so you understand what I'm talking about. If I had to guess, Void Gazer is counting every single tile when he enters Berserker stance because it's reading him as some like ranged hero. But when he's in his normal stance, it's only giving him a 2 tile bonus. That's my theory. It can be easily tested. I never have because I'm lazy and Void Gazer's bis on him. I've done that math, and the numbers high with Void Gazer, numbers low with Scarlet Hunt. It's that simple. Even at 100% uptime with the bleed, Void Gazer is that much stronger. Now, the next one we're going to talk about is going to be Soul Drainer. This one's better than people think. Increases block by 1, very strong, because if you remember progression or you're going through progression, they tend to want you to block lanes with fighters normally, because defenders aren't as common. You don't really want to stack defenders because then they can't kill who they're blocking. They tend to have these fighter lanes in progression, always have one more mob than your hero can block. That's where this comes in. So not only does this increase the block level by 1, it starts restoring HP equal to 1.2% of the max HP each time they deal damage to one target, stacking up to 3 times. So AoE heroes, this can be very strong. Even fast-hitting single target ones, very, very strong as well. Eye of Sin, I used it briefly. I thought there was something here. There's nothing here. The fact that it lasts for 3 seconds is... remove this from the game. There's no reason why this should be a mythic artifact. I mean, for mithril purposes, you can sell this for sure. Now we're going to talk about the legendary ones. This is where it gets interesting. The Watchguard's Ambition. I've never seen someone talk about this, and I tested this specifically because when you pair this with a champion that can already trigger an extra attack, it's very strong. Arrogance specifically is a good example of this, or if you're lucky enough to have the Toreador Lord, he's someone that has a chance to give his faction extra hits. The thing with this is it's going to cascade the effect. So I put this on an Arrogance, and if he gets an extra hit from his passive, which is right here, has a 25% chance to double strike. So on that 25% chance, when it procs, he has a 15% chance of proccing on the first hit and the second hit that he just procced. Now, when he procs Watchguard's Ambition, the basic attack that this procced resets and gives his passive another chance to proc. Are you following me? I've seen this thing in auto multi-battle speed, 3.5% whatever with the privilege card, proc so many times in a row on an Arrogance that instead of just flashing every time it procs, it was a still image for about 15 seconds. You might be thinking, that's busted. That's insane extra damage. It is, but Void Gazer is better because I tested this in the guild boss. Now, outside of the guild boss, I think this is going to be insanely strong on extra hit heroes, but I don't think it's going to be strong on non-extra hit heroes. Because again, what makes this so powerful is being able to chain multiple effects of extra attacks, because they all kind of cascade off of each other. If you can't do that, I don't think this is good, but if you can, 2 thumbs up for sure. The next one I've kind of played around with and can help you in progression, but it's going to be annoying, is the Lucky Legacy. Doesn't really do much besides give you a chance to get cost, and there are quite a few gear raid level thresholds you're going to hit where having extra cost will help you a ton based on your roster. Sometimes placing those high cost units first make a significant difference here. So if you have Lucky Legacy, maybe give it a shot. I don't think it's that good personally, but I will note that it can be viable for progression. Now that we talked about that, the next we're going to talk about are going to be mages. Now, hold on here. I've heard something, I don't really know what it is, that like my bucket doesn't like people with Tear of Starlights, or he like times people out in his Discord because he doesn't have a Tear of Starlight. My message to my bucket, get good. Just get good. I have 2 maxed and 119. Listen, you want to borrow one? Hit me up on Discord. I will lend you one of my Tear of Starlight. Because mages, and this is probably why he's upset if he truly does not have one of these, this is the best artifact in the game for any class. 30% attack. Listen, 30% attack at plus 25 is out of this world. Even when they get, okay, lower HP, 80% reduces to 15%, 30% attack on a hero and a hero type of mages where you're stacking attack. Insane. Like, out of this world. Now that we've gone over that, how good Tear of Starlight is, what are our other options for this? If you do AoE damage, you can use Skull of Desecration. I have a lot of them. I only have one max. That should be a fairly good indicator. Taking increased damage on a hero type of mage that's notoriously known for having low defense and HP, not the smartest idea. But if it scales well off of AoE, it's not a bad option. I would say the second best, in my opinion, is going to be Ajax Rage, because since you're stacking attack, crit rate, and attack speed where applicable, the crit damage boost is very nice, and 45% is a lot. So any mage that has an attack interval that's, I would say, 3 seconds or lower for 100% uptime on this is worth your time and is very strong. Book of Distortion has niche uses, but probably wouldn't recommend for most. Next we have the, I think, recently buffed Blue Ice Ring, or Blue Sea Ice Ring. They added the dealing 10% extra damage. This is nice if you need a slow to trigger some bonuses, but overall I would say this is not worth it, because if I remember correctly, I've upgraded this to 13 and then sold it because it really wasn't good. And based on that, I would say this is not a good one, and I have this for absolutely no reason. Next are the legendary ones. Now there's a few interesting ones that I don't use, but I could have used while progressing that I regret not having. The first is going to be Soul Eating Crystal. And you can notice a trend very quickly. Restores 3% rage when killing the target, cooldown 5 seconds. 3% rage isn't a ton of rage, but it can definitely make the difference in some niche scenarios. Now this is going to be the worst legendary crystal or artifact that I'm going to show you, but I wanted to show it just so I can stay on theme here. The next one is Spellcaster's Echo. Recovers 10% rage after using a skill. This is a much better version, obviously, of Soul Eating Crystal, because it's 10% rage uncapped after using a skill. So the faster you're using skills, the more rage you're getting. And the final one, along with this theme, is going to be Nightmare Samsara. Restores 5% rage for every 5 attacks. So in order of what's best and what's worse, it's hard to say because I haven't tested Spellcaster's Echo on every single mage to know what they determine a skill. If enough things can proc 10% rage, Spellcaster's Echo is going to be the best for sure. On attack speed stacking heroes, it's possible you can have this overtaken by Nightmare Samsara, but that's still debatable. So this has to be tested for sure, but both of these are very strong. So if you have them, and you're not at the level where you have 225 tiers and 119 tiers, you might want to consider waving goodbye to the days of dreaming of damage dealing mages and say, you know what, this is fine. Mages can just be my supports. Outside of that, ancestral teaching, as I mentioned, are going to be pretty baseline for most heroes. Getting to the end of the list here, we have defenders. For defenders, it's pretty straightforward. For damage dealing, Bloodthirst is going to take the cake. 25% damage that stacks up very quickly. I had a damage dealing Toreador. He dealt surprisingly strong damage. There are quite a few defenders that you can opt into a damage-based build. If you're going to do that, this is going to be the best option for you. As far as survivability goes, Olag's Wall is incredibly strong, damage reduction, and increases block. So, I mean, you can just kind of read this and understand how good this is. The next best option I would say would be Goddess's Grace. Increases defense by 11, gaining 3% every 10 seconds, stacking up to 3 times, so 9% extra, 20% total at level 10 out of 13. Defense is really good in this game. I think people don't understand how good it is because, I mean, reducing damage, and they're kind of just stacking HP. I went over that in my gear guide video, but this is very strong for that reason. As far as a budget version, Solar Rune when taking damage, which is the purpose of defenders, defense is increased by 12% for 3 seconds. Most mobs in this game, not all of them, most mobs have an attack speed interval higher than 3 seconds. If you kind of scroll through wherever you're at, and you will have this up most of the time. The next one I want to talk about is Heart of Thorn. I plan to do some testing on this, and if you've never heard of this before and you see future videos on this, they probably got it from here. Because when taking damage, there's an 8% chance of dealing damage equal to 10% maxed HP to the attacker. Now, what do I want to do with this? I want to find the highest base HP in the game, stack HP on them, throw them inside of Gear Raid 1, so they're taking damage non-stop, getting an 8% chance each time they're taking damage, and seeing if I can do some type of reflect damage tactical nuke with the Heart of Thorn. Again, I've never heard anyone talking about this before, and I probably should omit this from the video, but I'm going to give content creators who are watching this a chance to do the right thing and let me, I'm about to go on vacation. Give me a chance to test this to see how strong this is, and don't just take the idea. We'll see how that turns out. Obviously, you don't have to. You do you. But I think this could be busted in this specific scenario because even though 8% chance is kind of small, I mean, yeah, I don't really have enough of this to kind of test. Can I even upgrade it once? No, I'm going to run out right before. Not right before, but I'd be curious what increases here. I'm assuming not the 10% max HP. If it becomes more than 10%, this could be busted. And I would say it's probably going to just increase the chance of dealing damage, which we don't really care about because in Gear Raid 1, you're going to be getting slapped 1,000 times a second, so it's not going to matter too much. But I have a feeling this can be very strong. I'm excited to test this out when I am back, so definitely look for that. All right, so we're going to have our next section being healers. Now, this is going to be a trigger warning for like 99% of the people watching once you see the amount of artifacts I have here. Okay, so we have 225 Glyph of Euphorias and 2, 4, 6 spare copies. Now listen, Glyph of Euphoria is very strong. For 30 attack speed every 60 seconds, lasting for 40 seconds, so 20 seconds downtime, is incredibly strong if you can lower the attack interval of the champion. What does that mean? If you go to the gear section, click on this eye here, scroll down, you will see attack interval and attack speed. The attack speed has a ratio connected to the interval. So as you go up in attack speed, you are reducing the interval, and there are certain thresholds. If 30 attack speed is going to reduce that interval by 0.1 seconds on more than 2 heroes, Glyph of Euphoria is a monster powerhouse of a damage increase for your whole team that's in range. This just becomes stronger the more you have, because to my knowledge they do stack. Could be wrong on that. It's very hard to know how fast an interval is unless you get it to the second and you're watching when they're attacking like the guild boss and the seconds change. It's a really hard thing to track. I've tried to do it on multiple heroes and I'm down to like a 1.3, 1.4 interval, so it's really hard because we're talking about less than a second interval, right? So it's just hard to track, but I'm sure someone will be able to do it. So Glyph of Euphoria, my #1 pick for healers, of course. If you want to go on more of the defensive side, which you probably don't need to, I like the Elysian Folios. I think this is good because you get healing effect. It's a percentage, so it's not going to be that high. I mean, there are other ones that are decent. When HP is at maximum, increase healing effect by 30. This one's okay too, Jungle Relic, but again, like I mentioned in my gearing video, healers are pretty easy to gear. Now, I'm using Spirit Horn. This is some tech I've talked about with Valeria. Having her instantly ult, and you can snapshot Elwyn's ult onto Valeria, and you can override the cannot be healed part. Spirit Horn is very strong in a lot of scenarios because starting with practically full rage, I mean, if you go to the skill of any hero, it shows you their starting rage, which is this on the right here, and then how much their ultimate costs. 500 rage, assuming you fully booked her, is a lot of rage. 1200 is even more rage. Obviously, numbers are hard, math is hard. So the time it may take you to get here, if you're in a situation where you need instant healing, can be remedied with a baseline version of this, right? You get 25% when deployed baseline, and it goes up a pretty generous amount. As we can see, I'm 4 out of 5 upgrades, and I'm at 45%, which obviously once I get the last upgrade, it's going to go to 50. 50 is huge rage deployment. Outside of that, of course, ancestral teachings specifically for healers can be very strong if they do attack-based healing, and you need that extra bump in their throughput. So that is going to be the list of all of the artifacts for everyone. There are exclusive artifacts, but I don't want to talk about that because outside of like Zealous, they're not farmable. They're a chance to get from certain content, and I don't know why. Maybe you guys noticed this too. My account is like a Zealous manuscript magnet. I've had this maxed out. This is probably the first artifact I maxed out on my account before I had Zealous. And I've gotten like 1 billion copies of this. So they should, maybe they shouldn't remove this, but once you get it once, I think it should be disabled from the drop pool, and it should track once you get 6, it's over. And if someone deletes it by accident and then gets zealous, open a ticket so they can turn it back on. But being able to get this when it's exclusive to one hero after you've already maxed it seems like a waste, and it's just extra mithril. So I'm not going to talk about the unique ones you can get from the Void Rift because they're not going to be that common. They're going to be very specific. Some of them are very strong, I'll give them that, but not the best. The only ones I haven't really talked about are going to be things like a Blood Drinker. This is actually very good. I've started to do Watcher Realm takeovers for people, meaning I take some money and I clear gear raid 19, whatever they want, improve their teams. And I've been on a few accounts that have this, and for progression, with enough attack speed, you can completely self-sustain yourself on marksmen who take damage. And if I had this during my progression, it would have went much better. Because a lot of marksmen and a lot of progression maps are like kind of out in the middle of nowhere with no healer being dropped for quite some time. This can be huge for so many players. So I would say this is definitely not a top tier artifact, but the mix of damage and healing that you get from it is very, very powerful. The next one we can talk about is kind of Ragnarok. This one's going to have a much better synergy ratio with the Chaos Dominion faction. Maybe it's just Chaos faction, whatever they're called. When HP drops below 50%, the increase is doubled. I don't know how high this goes, but when I find out, I'll determine how good this is. 24% crit damage baseline is kind of high, but if it only goes up by like a 1% per level, which I'm kind of afraid it does, you can let me know in the comments if you know the answer to this. But depending on how high this goes, this can be insane. Like if we're getting 60% when below half health, I would really be curious. So if you have this information, let me know for sure. So with that, that's going to conclude this video. If you enjoyed this content, smash the like button, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and I will see you all in the next upload.